Ja, jetzt geht's endlich in medias res. Wir beginnen an, uns mit Inhalten und mit Vorträgen auseinanderzusetzen. Das erste Panel haben wir genannt Unsinn und Ambivalenz und wo der Begriff Unsinn herkommt, erklärt sich gleich. Den hat nämlich unser erster Redner Ludwig Drosch mitgebracht. Ludwig ist derzeit Doktorand an der Universität Hildesheim im Graduiertenkolleg Ästhetische Praxis, wo er sich mit der Frage beschäftigt, wie man eigentlich über Unsinn reden kann und ob Unsinn nicht immer sofort Sinn wird, wenn man anfängt, drüber zu sprechen. Und was ich besonders spannend fand, ich weiß nicht, ob es in deinem Vortrag jetzt auch vorkommt, ist, dass du versuchst, deinen Konnex zu zen-buddhistischen Überlegungen herzustellen, wie man Unsinn Unsinn lassen kann, ohne ihm gleich einen Sinn verleihen zu müssen. In diesem Sinne freue ich mich sehr auf deinen Vortrag und du hast das Wort.
Hello, hello. You hear me? Never used one of these things. So, hi, good morning. Very glad to be here. I'm going to be talking in English because of the bilingual thing. And I'm very glad to be standing here because I'm a huge fan of Kurt-Schwitters, the Dadaist. So it's a very great pleasure to participate in a Kurt-Schwitters-Symposium. I really want to thank the organizers for inviting me. So I'm going to put a timer before I forget it so I don't talk too long. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about Zen Buddhism, but I'm very happy to do so in the discussion or privately afterwards. Today I'm going to present like a brief excerpt out of my doctoral thesis, which is about nonsense, as you just heard. And I'm going to be concentrating on memes, Instagram reels, and diagrams I made about them. And basically in my thesis I looked at a whole lot of different practices that produce nonsense or deal with it in order to see what is actually happening there, what different ways of reacting do we have to things we call nonsense, what is nonsense, what is the relationship between sense and nonsense, all of these questions. And so my subtitle for the talk is Making Nonsense Out of Nonsense. I want to start with a brief video actually to set the mood. And I hope the sound will be working fine. Actually, the sound is not working, so I have to just choose the correct audio device, I think. Always the same thing. Or can I put sound here? Audio, PC. Nee, das ist Linux. Das hatte ich auf HDMI eigentlich gerade vorgemacht, absichtlich. Ah, it's muted, okay. Sorry, technology. Oh, wow, yes.
Excuse me.
Me?
So basically the reason for me doing my PhD is just looking at these things all of the time and just being fascinated and wondering what the hell is going on. And so one of the questions I ask myself is, why is there so much happening there? Why does it make so much sense actually, like loads of associations, reactions? It's like really affecting to view these things. There's a lot of things condensed in these kind of videos. And the second question I was asking myself, like, why is this stuff so popular? Like millions of people, we share this stuff and watch it. It's extremely popular. And how can you differentiate it from what you call senselessness? Like we all want to go away from what we call senseless, but we're drawn to this kind of stuff. And so I wanted to ask myself, can you actually understand nonsense? But then the problem is, as soon as, like with a philosopher's eye, you try to make sense out of nonsense, you start to destroy it. You try to put it into context, you try to like analyze it, like see what's happening, try to analyze the language, the symbols, all of these things. So the next question is, where does it go once you've made sense of it? Is it an illusion? If it's not an illusion, are you like obligated to just leave it there and just accept that you won't ever understand it? It's like a very basic way of putting that there's kind of like a paradox in wanting to understand nonsensical practices. To give an example, and I'm going to start with my first diagram, you might say that the kind of reels I just showed you are a kind of like imitation, a mimetism of our chaotic, overwhelming, nonsensical world. So like if you look at the world, quite a lot of shit is going on, it doesn't really make sense. And so this is a way of participating mimetically by imitation, getting into the rhythm of this nonsensical world. And so this is actually a way of feeling into the world and of like dealing with it and of kind of getting free of all the load of what's happening. But if you put it like this kills the nonsense. Like actually it's a very utilitarian view on these kinds of practices. So this is like a very old-time meme of like a very cruel picture from a cooking book, just to explain it. Maybe you've seen it before. So you run into this like very strange paradox all the time, that the thing that you actually value the most in these experiences, that they don't make sense, that they cut off your understanding and just make you feel an overwhelming sensuous presence. As soon as you start to understand this, it goes away. And so what I try to do in my thesis is to try to find ways where the opposition between understanding and non-understanding, between sense and nonsense, rationality, irrationality, is not so strict and not so fixed. And one way of doing this is trying to find a way where you don't get to understand or know something by like fixing it down, finding a definition, finding like concepts, putting it in a strict order, but rather putting things that you observe in a system of relations and trying to learn certain attitudes of encountering experiences, trying to put things in a continuum rather. So rather than search for like a strict criterion, like what is sense, what is nonsense, what ways can we find to open up like a whole continuum and field of experience where all of these experiences take place and they're just like extremes in like a continuous flow of our experience. And so we might find like very varied attitudes to what we encounter, like not only knowing, but for example also feeling, participating, connecting, finding into a rhythm or turning away, or making a difference, producing, etc., which are all valued in a certain sense. And knowing and understanding might play a part in all of them, but sometimes maybe not. And one way that I want to share with you today, because like I wanted to choose like one particular aspect of my work because it's specialized, is like the use of diagrams in order to achieve this approach to experience. But before I do so, just to give you a glimpse, like in my research on the term of nonsense, like I read a lot about nonsense poetry, on philosophy, on logic and stuff. And actually I ended up with kind of a definition of nonsense, which is contradicting the thing that I just said, I know, but like it's not definitive, it's just like, so you better know what I'm talking about. And so my favorite one is by the philosopher Deleuze. He says, nonsense is an absence of sense that produces sense. So it pulls in both directions at once, to meaninglessness and to meaning at the same time. Wim Tigges, researcher on nonsense poetry, says it's an absence of a point, a perplexity. T.S. Eliot, the poet, says it's a parody of sense. And Jean-Jacques Le Cercle, a literary scholar, taking him up, says it's self-reflexive sense. So it's like all the nuances that go into these practices. And like my favorite definition is actually saying that it's an absence of dominant sense that produces a perplexity of potentials for sense. There's kind of like a cut of an expectation of a sense that you put into it that opens something up. And the word dominant here is chosen quite on purpose, because another thing that I won't go too much into here, but I want just to call it out, so kind of, is that these relations are always tied up with relations of power. So like, who gets to decide what the sense is, what like, which sense something is going, etc. These relations of power. And so let's get to the first diagram, which is actually really, really stupid. But then one of the goals was to build stupid diagrams to get like a feel, like to stay with the feel of nonsense and not losing it while viewing these things. So like the thing that I just said, you can also put it like this. You have a clear sense, clear direction, a clear reference, a clear pathway. It's getting cut, and you're getting thrown in a field of a lot of possible directions. As I said, it's like not, it's like pretty stupid. Another one. I'm gonna go for the next one, and then we're gonna go show another example. Is this? With this, I tried to like point out different intensities of the experience of nonsense. So, right at the top, you might have what you might call like a frustration of an expectation. So you go into an experience with a certain expectation, and then you're thrown in another direction. You get a sort of surprise and shock. And if it's done well and with good rhythm, you get like a blank and a perplexity, and you're still like, huh, what's going on? But more intensely is if you take out the small difference, if you manage at the same time to go in both directions. So like to say one thing, but at the same time say another. Like go one way, but the other at the same time, kind of. If you manage to do this, then the perplexity will be bigger. And C is just like the intensification of this if you manage to go in opposite directions at the same time, say two things at the same time. Try to do it, by the way, it's not so easy, like it's almost impossible. Then you will get the maximum of perplexity. Now I want to show another brief example to maybe explain this a bit better. And this is another Instagram reel that by a creator that I really like who's called Beanies, and I think he's a genius. So yeah, this is, I really check him out if you don't know him, Beanies. He's fantastic. And so what you have here is it's really fascinating here because you have a seeming congruence or coherence through the song and through a certain rhythm. So you're just riding through the thing. So there's a certain way of going forward that kind of feels sensical. But at the same time, you have the incongruence of the things that are being shown, but that still share some commonalities in the way that, of the movements that are being shown, like the jumps and falls, and so there's kind of like an effective, sensuous commonality between these things. And so all the while you're watching this, you're being torn in different directions. You're kind of riding along, but at the same time you're like, what am I actually riding along with? And in the end, it's not so important. But this is like one example for like this going in different senses at the same time. Then this is one of my favorite, which is also actually really stupid. Maybe you can look at it for 2 or 3 minutes. Not so long, sorry, in just a few seconds. And then I will try to explain what this means. So basically, this is just a way that I tried to point out the very basic experience that you might start with an experience of confusion, of perplexity, of like nonsense. And by looking further at it, it might reinforce itself. You might get more perplexed. This is the top line. So like the directions are still chaotic. But you also have the second case where something that at first seemed very chaotic actually goes in a clear direction. And just as an aside, because I'm also not going into this like very strongly now because I don't have the time, I was also looking in my thesis at the usage of memes and of like nonsense strategies by the far right and Donald Trump. And I ended up arguing that actually, very strictly, it's not nonsense, because every time you look at it more closely, the direction is very clear. It's like a very clear sense of dominance, of racism, of white supremacy, of violence, patriarchy, etc., etc. So it actually might be hidden tactics and communicative strategies, but the sense is actually very, very clear. So I don't feel like this is true nonsense that I want to get into. So this is a further diagram, which I try to use to also show different intensities of this experience. So the top line is kind of like you go into certain like expectation of sense, then it's getting cut and you're getting thrown back to the start. The second one is more intense. You don't even have the time to like follow a certain expectation or certain like feeling, you're thrown right back to the perplexity. And this, for example, you find it also in paradoxes, like logical paradoxes, where right from the start, you can't really get into understanding it. So I was also looking at stuff like Russell's paradox, the set of all sets that don't contain themselves. Like as soon as you look at this thing, it breaks down and you're like thrown in a loop, kind of. Okay, so now I have another video, which I will then connect with the next diagram. And this is also one of my favorite things ever. So yes, so you might have recognized the theme from 20th Century Fox, like the movie company, the movie production company. And this is a video called Ketchup Bot. Oops. Yes, and this I want to connect with this diagram here. Because like in watching the Ketchup Bot, like I was quite fascinated. You could say it's like a parody of certain norms of, or like images of automatism, robots, technology, these kind of things, and it's playing them down to the ridiculous thing that it turns out to be most of the time. It's also making fun of a certain pomposity of like the movie theme that it's using, so it's playing down a lot of tech pomposity, you could say. And so you have something like a norm or like a vague paradigm, like the tech pomposity, I would call it. You have a clownification of it. But actually what you're seeing is in these kind of things, because like the dominant norm of tech pomposity is so strong in our current moment of history, you're actually seeing both at the same time in a certain sense, because it's in the background of your experience of seeing this Ketchup Bot. And in the difference of the two, this is what I tried to show in the bottom thing, is you see a kind of like condensation of these differences, and I try to argue in my thesis something like a whole continuum then opens up of actually different like ways you could deal with technology, different ways you could experience it, different playfulnesses. So it's like a field of possibilities where like tech pomposity is just one extreme and the clownification is the other, and there's like a whole lot of things that could happen in between. So it has this kind of like opening effect, which I tried to like show with this clown schema. And this one was a lot of fun to make as well. So then this one, do I still have a bit of time? Yes. This is a thing because this gets a bit more into the ethics of nonsense. Because oftentimes when you look at these practices, there's like different feelings to it, different also affects to it. Like sometimes there's more like anger and confrontation, like on the bottom right. Sometimes it's a bit more like playful, innocent, oblivious, kind of like more consciously or even not consciously idiotic maybe. And this is like a very basic way that I try to put graphically the psychodynamic or like the sociodynamic relationship between, on the one hand, like norm, judgment, you should, like the strict, you should be reasonable, you should make sense, this should be useful, this is like the top thing, which often this perspective can be right. I'm not saying that's always like wrong, but it can be like very stern. And then on the bottom left, there's like the oblivious, playful guy who doesn't even understand the norms that are being put to him. So he might be on a whole other level, actually, intentionally or not, which makes the norm even more angry. So there's like a dynamic. And the bottom right is somebody who's like more conscious, I guess, of the norms and tries to attack them directly. And if you look at the practices of the Dadaists, for example, you have like the whole effective range between these. You have like the very confrontational tactics of like insulting the public, of throwing stuff at them, of like breaking out fights, of like really frustrating people, which would be more on the right. But you also have like very playful, silly dances that like people also, after the description, if you read them, just enjoyed hugely. So this is like one aspect of getting more into like the sociodynamics, the psychodynamics, and the aesthetics of these practices. And this is actually my final example, and I'm right on time. This is an example I really like from René Magritte, the painter, and this for me would be like an example for like the more idiotic, playful approach. And it's a so-called période vache, so it's a period where he painted on purpose in a like very dilettante way, like very incongruently. So here you see like two hasen, how do you say hasen? I forgot. Like hypnotic animals, like playing pom 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 pom, which is also the title of the painting, which I really like. And besides them, there's like a ham, and there's an onion in the sky as the sun. And so I guess I'm going to leave you with this, and I hope you took some things out of this talk and some associations, some things to think about, and I'm happy to talk more about it in the discussion afterwards. Thank you a lot for listening.